Welcome guys, welcome to this channel Soulmate Pharma. Today's topic of discussion is adverse drug reaction, which is a roadmap to the pharmacovigilance. Now, before starting, I'd like to share some few coded points. So this would be the first topic under the pharmacovigilance program, which will be launched from this channel. And since to get the required participation badge or certificate, you need to watch all the videos related to the pharmacovigilance. There will be some other modules, other topics which will be discussed under this pharmacovigilance program, and you need to watch the entire video as well as like and subscribe the channel, and to share the evidences for the same in the form of screenshot or something else. And after that, once the evidences are shared and once the course gets completed, then you would be provided with the required participation certificate from this channel. So now moving on to this topic on this discussion. So adverse drug reaction, this is a roadmap to pharmacovigilance, because we all know that what is pharmacovigilance basically. Pharmacovigilance is a science which deals with detection, assessment, collection, reporting and prevention of adverse drug reaction or adverse drug event. So pharmacovigilance is mainly based on adverse drug reactions. So before understanding pharmacovigilance, we need to understand what basically adverse drug reaction is and what are the various aspects, branches of adverse drug reaction. So this has been, topic is named as roadmap to pharmacovigilance. So now moving on to the first slide. Now, so this is basically the definition of adverse drug reaction as per WHO, World Health Organization. Adverse drug reaction is a response which is noxious and unintended and which occurs at a dose, drug dose, normally in humans for the prophylaxis, diagnosis or therapy of disease or for the modification of physiological function. So one drug is prescribed at a particular dose for therapeutic purpose. Now, it is expected that it will produce a desired benefit therapeutic effect, but sometimes it may produce some effects which are not intended actually, or which may be harmful for the effect, harmful for the person. Some are expected and some are totally not expected. Such effects are not expected. So the definition of adverse drug reaction is that only the dose, which is some effect which occurs at a normal dose meant for prophylaxis, diagnosis or therapy of disease or the modification of modification of physiological functions. Now this definition has been revised from time to time and new terms has been introduced. So as per the European Union pharmacovigilance legislation, here you can see that the term drug has been replaced by medicinal product, a noxious and unintended response to a medicinal product. This can be through the normal use of the medicine, but also as a result of misuse, abuse or medication error, overdose, off-label use or during occupational exposure. So prior to 2012, the terms misuse, abuse, medication error, off-label use were not present in the definition of adverse drug reaction. But after 2012, these things are also included in the definition of ADR, under the scope of ADR. And these terms, misuse, abuse, medication error, overdose and off-label use, we will discuss this later during the course of our pharmacovigilance program. Now, next comes the definition of adverse event. Adverse event can be defined as an untoward medical occurrence that may present during treatment with a medicine, but which does not necessarily have a causal relationship with the treatment. The idea is to record all adverse events first and look for causality only while analyzing pooled data. So what happens? What is the difference between adverse event and adverse drug reaction? So adverse event is a broad term under which adverse drug reaction comes. The adverse event is something which occurs after consuming a drug. For example, if someone is consuming paracetamol and after that the person is driving a car and he made an accident, so this will be considered as an adverse event. So any mishappen on any occurrence which occurs after taking a drug is classified as an adverse event. But what is adverse drug reaction? Adverse drug reaction is something which focuses on the relationship of that particular event with that particular drug. So all the events, any mishappening or something which occurs after taking a particular drug needs to be reported, and after that a causal relationship is done in pharmacovigilance field, whether that event might have any sort of temporal relationship or causal relationship with that particular drug. Based upon various factors like time of occurrence, the intensity of occurrence, etc., the relationship is assessed whether by any chance the drug is responsible or the drug can cause that particular event or not. If the causal relationship is determined or if you found based upon some calculations, there are a lot of calculations there which we will also see later on, and if any sort of relationship is detected, then this will be considered as adverse drug reactions. So adverse drug reaction is a part of adverse event only, which has a causal relationship or which has a association with that particular drug. And if it doesn't have any sort of association with that particular drug, if it is found that the particular event has no association, then it will not be considered as adverse drug reaction, but it will be reported and it will be considered as an adverse event. So this is the basic idea of adverse drug reaction and adverse event. Now, moving on to the classification of adverse drug reaction. So the first is the DOTS classification. DOTS is dose, time and susceptibility classification of adverse drug reaction. So first, the dose relatedness. Under this dose relatedness, the classification is based upon the dose. First is toxic effect. Adverse drug reaction that occur at a dose higher than the usual therapeutic dose. Those are known as toxic effects. Example, liver failure with paracetamol means excessive consumption of paracetamol or excessive accumulation of paracetamol may lead to liver failure, which is a toxic effect. Correlated effects. Adverse reaction that occur at a standard therapeutic dose, the dose which is intended for the use of people. At that dose, if any sort of event is occurring, then this is known as collateral effect. Example, nausea with morphine. So if someone is consuming morphine at a normal therapeutic dose only, he or she will experience nausea. Then hypersusceptibility reactions. As adverse drug reactions that occur at a subtherapeutic dose in susceptible patients means it occurs at very low dose, even below the normal dose of administration. Adverse drug reaction occur. For example, anaphylaxis occurs with a very low dose of penicillin also. Then time-dependent classification or time-relatedness. So these are basically time-dependent classification is basically of two types: time-independent reaction and time-dependent reaction. And time-dependent reaction can be divided as early reaction, intermediate reaction, late reaction, or delayed reaction. So what is time-independent reactions? So these occur at any time during treatment and may be triggered by something which causes a change in drug concentration. Example, warfarin dose increase the risk of hemorrhage. So when the warfarin dose is increased, then hemorrhage risk or bleeding risk is also increased. Now comes time dependent reaction. Rapid reaction of which occurs when a drug is administered too rapidly. Means it occurs at a particular time. It can be categorized on basis of time. So the first one is early reaction, which occurs early in treatment and then abate or slows down with continuous treatment. So initially when nitrate is induced to the patients, glycerol trinitrate, disorbate trinitrate, this sort of drugs are introduced, then initially it will cause headache, but slowly this effect will be abated. So that means basically it's talking about tolerance only. Means your body is getting adjusted or accustomed with the effect of those drugs. So this is known as tolerance. Intermediate reactions occur after some delay, but if reaction does not occur after a certain time, then it will not occur, or it may occur but at a very little intensity. The examples are some of the allergic reactions like ampicillin, amoxicillin dependent pseudoallergic rash. Then comes the late reactions. Here, the risk of adverse drug reaction increases with continued to repeated exposure, including withdrawal reactions. So, withdrawal symptoms are also included in this late reaction. Example, paroxetine withdrawal symptoms. So, what withdrawal symptom basically is? So, when a drug is administered, continuously drug is being provided to a person, then the body physiology gets adjusted with that particular drug. The body becomes dependent with that drug. Now, when suddenly the drug is withdrawn, then the person may experience some side effects initially. That could be nausea, headache, depression, anxiety, or various side effects. So, this is basically withdrawal symptoms. The symptoms are experienced after withdrawal of the drug, after discontinuation of the drug suddenly. Next comes delayed reaction, which occurs sometime after exposure, even if the drug is withdrawn before the adverse drug reaction. Example, clear cell cancer with stilbestrol. Now, based on susceptibility of reaction, so what is susceptibility? Raised susceptibility may be present in some individuals but not others. Alternatively, susceptibility may follow a continuous distribution, increasing susceptibility with impaired renal function. Factors included in susceptibility include genetic variation, age, sex, ethnicity, altered physiology, exogenous factors, disease. So, based upon these criteria, 6 criteria, you can see that based upon genetic variation, age, sex, ethnicity, the susceptibility or the tendency of adverse reaction alters in person to person. So we'll discuss this susceptibility factor one by one. So what is age? So under this age, see, elimination of liver metabolism may reduce due to decline of metabolism capacity and due to decreased blood flow through the portal vein, thus reducing first-pass metabolism. Renal function declines in approximately 2/3 of elderly people, reducing clearance of drugs. The viability of a drug might be higher than expected in young children, which increases the risk for adverse drug reaction. They have a relatively large body surface area with an increased permeability for compounds, especially newborns and newborns. Furthermore, the skin of children is thinner and easily damaged, thus increasing absorption of substances applied to the skin. So what happens? So based upon age, the absorption pattern, the ATME profile or the absorption distribution metabolism expression profile of a drug alters, and as a result, the adverse drug reaction tendency or propensity also alters from based upon the age of a person. Now next comes the gender. So the absorption rate varies among the male and female as well. Because of delayed gastric emptying time, women may need to extend the interval between eating and taking medications that must be absorbed on an empty stomach. So the gastric emptying time is slightly delayed in case of female, and so the absorption pattern is also altered. Women are 50 to 75% more likely than men to experience an adverse drug reaction. So this is a common trait which, while when we just deal with pharmacovigilance cases, then we have also observed that, that most of the adverse drug reactions occur with women only. And research also suggests that 50 to 75% they have a more propensity to get suffered from adverse drug reaction. Now, ethnicity. So, based upon ethnicity, different ethnic groups have different sort of adverse drug reactions. So, as you have recent example, as you have seen that corona has widely badly affected the Americans, whereas the Africans were not initially affected too much. So, based upon ethnicity also, the disease as well as the drug effect varies. Asians were most frequently determined to be high risk of anticoagulant-related adverse drug reactions, and the black patients were most frequently determined to be at a higher risk for diabetes agents-related adverse drug effects. Whites are more frequently identified as at increased risk for opioid-related adverse effects. So these are based upon research articles, journals, which are already established. Now, altered physiology. So that means it includes the pregnancy, disease state, weight, etc. Pregnancy has an impact on drug treatment. Not only are women affected by the drug, but the fetus will also be exposed to adverse drug reaction of the drug. Antihypertensive drugs such as angiotensin converting enzymes, inhibitors, and angiotensin 2 receptors blockers pose a risk to a health and the normal development of a fetus. So, obese people may store large amount of fat-soluble drug as they have a high amount of fatty tissues, adipose tissues, etc. Whereas very thin people may store relatively little amount of such drugs, and thus this will be excreted easily, and thus it will not cause such severe adverse drug reaction due to accumulation. Now, classification based on onset of event. So there are three categories in this subcategories: acute, subacute, and acute. So acute reactions are those which occurs within 60 minutes of consuming a drug. Subacute occurs within 1 to 24 hours, and latent reactions occurs after 2 days. Now, classification based on severity. It includes mild, moderate, severe, and lethal. So, what are mild effects? These are bothersome effects. It doesn't require change in therapy, antidote, and prolongation of hospitalization is required. So, for example, different people experience nausea and vomiting with most of the drugs. Most of the drugs cause nausea and vomiting. So these are usually the normal side effects of a drug, and we don't need any sort of alteration in therapy or change in therapy. So these are considered as mild effect. For example, what happens when corona vaccine is administered intramuscularly, then what we experience? We may experience some sort of pain at the site of administration. So it causes hand pain since the drug is administered intramuscularly. So that is a mild side effect, and it is usually bothersome, and it doesn't require any sort of separate treatment. Now, moderate effect. This requires change in therapy, specific treatment, and prolongation of hospitalization by at least 1 day. So it's somewhat a bit severe type of effect, but doctor may suggest to change in therapy or change in dose of the therapy, or it may lead to hospitalizations also. Now, severe effects. These are really matter of concern. Severe effects are a matter of concern and totally unexpected. It may cause potentially life-threatening cases, permanent damage, or requires intensive medical treatment. So these are critical effects. And lethal. Lethal is very, very, very severe, as it will directly or indirectly contribute to the death of the patient. Now, Rawlins Thompson classification. So there are 6 subcategories under this: type A, B, C, D, E, and F. So the type A is augmented reaction, which is otherwise known as exaggerated effect of drug. These are basically mild and predictable effects which are very common and occurs at a normal particular dose of a drug, and hence these are dose dependent. And these are mechanism based or based upon the normal pharmacological action of a drug, and occur most commonly in a drug with a very low therapeutic index. And these are not associated with causing high mortality, or if mortality occurs, then it's very, very, very low. It includes basically side effects, toxic effects, consequences of drug withdrawal. Some of the examples are bleeding caused by warfarin and anticoagulants, bronchospasm or bradycardia associated with beta blockers, deafness with aminoglycosides. So these are particularly common type of effects. Type B, desired reaction or idiosyncratic. Idiosyncratic means it's totally unpredictable and it varies from person to person. So since it varies from person to person and totally unpredictable, the mechanism of this cannot be determined. The mechanism or the reason for such effect is not clear. So since these are really difficult, or the cause of such effects are not easy to identify, so the treatment is also difficult, and these are risky as well. These reactions are not expected from the known pharmacological actions of the drug. They are associated causing high mortality, since, as I've already said, the treatment is difficult as they are totally unpredictable, so it will definitely cause mortality. Unpredictable, less compound, and not dose dependent, often serious as they may be discovered for the first time after a drug has already been available for general use, as it varies from person to person, so it could be from first time as well. Anaphylaxis in response to penicillin, aplastic anemia caused by chloramphenicol, malignant hyperthermia in response to anesthetic are some of the examples of type B reactions. Now, type C reactions are also known as chronic type of reactions, which occur due to the cumulative drug use leading to dose accumulation. These are uncommon type, dose dependent, and as well as time dependent. Example include osteonecrosis of jaw with the use of bisphosphonates, Cushing syndrome from cortisone, Cushing hepatotoxic associated with paracetamol, antimalarial drug associated ocular toxicity, etc. So these type C reactions occurs at a continuous rate, and these are chronic in nature. So type D is also somewhat related to type C also, but the difference is that here the dose does not tend to accumulate, which occurs in type C short of reactions. These are delayed reactions which occur due to prolonged use of a drug or exposure at critical times, which does not tend to accumulate. This is the difference. They are uncommon and usually dose dependent, difficult to detect due to lag time between administration of drug and symptoms appear. Mutagenicity or carcinogenicity, which we already know these things, are the examples of type D reactions. Some of the specific examples are leukopenia may be caused during use of lomustine, bladder carcinoma after treatment with cyclophosphamide, tardive dyskinesia caused by antipsychotic medications. That means this occurred at a delayed stage, not immediately. Type A reactions or end-of-use reactions are linked to the withdrawal of a medicines. These are uncommon and occur soon after the withdrawal of a drug. So withdrawal symptoms, as I have earlier discussed, what is withdrawal symptoms? So type A reactions are basically withdrawal symptoms. Opioid withdrawal symptoms, rebound hypotension, on clonidine withdrawal. So whatever withdrawal symptoms which we experience or a patient experience after discontinuation of a drug are included in this type A. Type A. Type A means failure of therapy or lack of effect. So this lack of effect is a widely used term used in pharmacovigilance reporting, which we will discuss in subsequent topics. These reactions are common, dose-related, and often caused by drug interactions. So what happens? A lack of effect means a drug at a particular dose is producing it's not producing an effect. So a dose which has been established. For example, paracetamol, the established dose for a normal adult is 500 to 650 milligram. Now, at a particular dose, if that drug is not producing the desired effect, which is expected to produce, means it is expected to reduce fever and body. But if the paracetamol is not doing that, then paracetamol is causing a lack of effect to the particular patient. So this is basically the concept of lack of effect in easy language. The decreased effect of antibiotics due to resistance of a microorganism or tumor to the drug action, quinine resistance in malaria, etc. So different resistance which we have seen among the antibiotic resistance microorganism or different short crop resistance terms which we have seen, these are including type A people. We have also seen that during nowadays mosquitoes do not die or do not get means no effect is produced towards the mosquitoes when we just use different mosquito repellent products. Earlier we used to see that a normal mosquito repellent product used to produce different sort of effect, but nowadays mosquitoes do not even die due to the use of these mosquito repellent products, different creams, different oils, gas, but in no ways mosquitoes die. So mosquitoes are also started developing resistance towards these mosquito repellent products. So these are all categorized under type F, type of reaction. So it occurs when sometimes due to lack of effect or sometimes as the organism gets resistance, the disease-causing organism gets resistance to the particular drugs. So particular drug is not able to produce the desired effect, and thus it may show lack of effect. Now, this is a very important topic and very important question which is asked during pharmacovigilance interviews as well, and this is a worldwide pharmacovigilance convention. So, how to identify what is a serious adverse event? So, lot of things are reported, lot of events are reported in pharmacovigilance system. So, we need to classify those events as serious as well as non-serious event, and accordingly, we need to prioritize those cases and work on those cases. So, how will we know that an event is serious? So, as there are some categories in pharmacovigilance, and if we see if it is directly reported that the adverse event causes the following things, then we will consider that adverse event as a serious, and these are basically known as seriousness criteria, adverse seriousness criteria in pharmacovigilance. So any adverse effect or adverse drug reaction which results in death, which can be life-threatening, which may produce hospitalization, which may prolong the existing hospitalization, which may result in persistent or significant disability or incapacity, or which results in congenital anomaly or birth defect. So if any event produces such consequences or such outcomes, then that particular event will be considered as a serious event in pharmacovigilance. So hospitalization and prolonged hospitalization, as the name suggests, the difference is that particularly if someone is getting admitted to the hospital due to particular event, then the seriousness criteria is hospitalization. But the stay of hospitalization, if it is prolonged due to some other event during hospitalization stay or due to some other consequences, then the seriousness criteria will be considered as prolonged hospitalization. That means due to the course of treatment in hospital, some other phenomenon or something, some other thing occurs, and due to which the course of hospitalization increases. So the seriousness criteria will become prolonged hospitalization. So these are various sources of adverse drug reaction reports. So this will also be discussed in detail in our subsequent topics. So there are various sources, reports from physician, healthcare professional, patients, consumers. These are known as spontaneous reports basically. Then different observational monitoring studies are done in hospitals. Different students or different students during their college life, they just visit hospitals and they do their projects in hospitals in study pattern or observation study. These are also the sources of reporting. Different phases of clinical trials, not only phase 4 of pharmacovigilance, but other phases of clinical trials may also act as a source of adverse drug reaction reports. Different social media sites are also there where people post different concerns or the different effects related to a particular drug which the person has suffered basically. Different email communication we also receive from different sort of people or different vendors which suggests what are the different adverse events which a person has experienced. Different literature, articles, journals also serve as a source of adverse drug reactions. There are different vendors which work on behalf of a particular company, particular marketing authorization holders, whose job is to just collect the adverse drug reactions, adverse drug reports, then different email, fax, info, telephone calls, which people receive. Different call centers are also there who just receive those email, fax, telephone calls on behalf of marketing authorization holders. Some special studies are also there, like controlled studies, cohort studies, steady state studies, observational studies. These we will all see the definition of these terms will all see in our subsequent topics. So these are also the different sources of adverse drug reporting, and it's also an important question or important topic or pharmacovigilance interview. So today that's all for today. Hope you have liked our video, and these are all the references from where I have collected different data. And if you have liked the video, then please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing it. And please hit the bell icon as well. And please stay updated, stay healthy. And guys, thank you for listening. Bye bye and take care.